Every artist gets asked the question, where do you get your ideas? The honest artist answers, I steal them. How does an artist look at the world? First, you figure out what's worth stealing, then you move on to the next thing. That's about all there is to it. Those were the first 5 lines in Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. Those first few lines got me absolutely hooked, and I finished the book in 2 sittings because of how captivating and inspiring it was. Not only do books captivate and inspire, but they entertain and educate. But you wouldn't be feeling those things if you weren't reading. Would it surprise you to hear that Americans are turning less and less to reading in their free time? In my free time, the only thing I want to do is read. I've read over 50 books this year, and I've personally benefited from the results of daily reading. I hope you find my love for reading, despite it becoming less and less popular to others, it will always be one of my favorite activities. Americans are reading far less today than they were in the past. I want to share 2 graphs from Gallup, a global analytics and advice firm. This was from an article written by PhD holder Jeffrey M. Jones at the beginning of this year titled, Americans Reading Fewer Books Than in the Past. So in this first graph, the question is during the past year about how many books did you read, either all or part of the way through. 1990, it started with 15, a little over 15 books, and in 2021, it's dropped down to 12 books. Notice the question, they didn't even have to read all the way through for it to count. The second graph I want to share is the number of books read in the past year. Notice the highest percent, 40%, was 1 to 5 books. And then 17% of the people who took the survey didn't even read any books at all this past year. Last week, I put up a poll on my Instagram and Facebook story asking my followers a series of questions regarding reading. One of those questions was how many books they read in a year. I got about 60 responses, and of those people who took that poll, they read less than 6 books this past year. Let me share another problem with you, with people not reading often enough. I've heard reading is described as one of the healthiest hobbies for our mind. When you don't read, your brain loses its sharpness. Reading a book requires active attention and engagement. David Brooks, an author and teacher at Yale University, shared his thoughts about building attention span in the July 2015 issue of the New York Times. He compared reading to turning to social media as our activity of choice. His research showed that reading brings better focus and your attention span grows. I know when I haven't been reading in a few days, my mind is all over the place and my attention span is thin, especially when I've been turning from the steady pace of reading to the constant bounce of dopamine that come from scrolling on TikTok, watching new videos every 7 to 30 seconds. The last problem I'll note with the lack of reading today is an important one. Those who don't read often show less empathy. Think about how much empathy you need in your own life. Everyone benefits from empathy. We need that emotional connection with others. Civic Science came out with an article in 2017 titled, Data Show that Millennials who read less tend to exhibit less empathy. And through surveys and polls to millennials, they've begun to see an increase in millennials answering that books are not important to them, and an increase of millennials who say they don't enjoy interacting with people who have differing opinions than their own. Before I read Steal Like an Artist, I could not relate to artists at all. Their processes, passion struggles, I just thought, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, I don't paint or draw or sculpt, and I didn't care. Once I read this book, I learned that I do have creativity in me, and I began to learn more about what artists grow through and how it relates to me. I felt my empathy and relatability grow towards artists, and I can account that for taking the time to read this book. So I shared 3 problems with you relating to people's lack of reading, and I want to share with you the good and the benefits that come from daily reading. I want to address the fact that Americans are reading far less today than they were in the past. From that same Gallup article that I showed those graphs, Jeffrey M. Jones said, quote, Americans can order books or download electronic books or audiobooks and without even leaving their home, end of quote. They simply need to start by getting a book, and it's so easy to do so. We have so many resources around us. I personally love the Libby app because it connects to the public library, so you can download hundreds of books and it's free. But you can also go to the public library or a bookstore for physical copies. I've shared with you all that when you don't read, your brain loses its sharpness. Reading brings better focus and your attention span grows. Rita Carter, a writer and journalist who specializes in the working of the human brain, spoke at a TEDx in 2018. In her talk titled "Why Reading Matters," she said, "When we read fiction especially, we create new pathways in our brain. Reading 30 pages of fiction every night gets the pathways thicker and thicker. Our brains need a workout just like our body. It's important to know that reading is like a muscle and you need to exercise it to benefit both your body and mind." I shared with you all those who don't read often show less empathy. Well, there are hundreds of scientific studies showing that empathy and reading are clearly linked, but I want to share an experience from an avid reader and YouTuber, Elena Tabor. She posted a video at the beginning of this year titled, "I read a book for a week, for a year, and it changed my life." I was extremely motivated to set more reading goals after I listened to her talk about how much reading has affected her. One of her biggest takeaways from this experience was that reading opened up the world and let her gain a much more diverse array of knowledge and opinions. Elena felt drawn to people she had never considered before. That's what reading did to her. Now I know the common objections. I get too distracted. I don't have enough time to read. Let me invite you to change your mindset. Take your learning and reading into your own hands. Put your phone or towel on Do Not Disturb while you're reading, or get a hard copy and turn your phone off altogether. Think about how many times a day you pull out your phone when you're waiting in line or waiting for a friend at school, and use that time to read instead. Let me help you see the difference in society if everyone took the time to read daily. There would be an increase in connection with others, as they would be more focused to take time to listen and empathize. Our stress would be reduced and our minds settled. Dr. David Lewis said, "Losing yourself in a book is the ultimate relaxation. Reading becomes an escape from the stresses going on around, opening a new world full of ideas, imaginations, and perspective." You've learned that among many benefits of reading comes greater focus and empathy. I shared suggestions on getting access to books via the Libby or Kindle app or physical books at libraries or bookstores. We can't just end here with nothing to get us started to increase our reading. To start reading today and acting upon what you've heard, I want to invite each of you to write down in your calendar or notebook to get a book you can start reading digitally or physically. So pull out your phones or get out your notebook, write down, get a book to start reading today. This way, when class is over, you haven't completely forgot what I've shared or how you feel about reading. Reading is always something that you'll fall back onto, and it's always going to be there. This is a hobby that can grow with you and change you. Start today and let reading change your life.